little bit about how cities might connect with each other and what might be, alliances of the ambitious.
Right.
The old phrase of coalitions of the willing is in disrepute, I think.
Although, depending on what side of the aisle you're on.
Indeed.
But, you mentioned earlier the Hanseatic League, and I was going to bring that up as well. When I think the Hanseatic League was not just a customs union, Zollverein, as they called it. It was actually a defense pact as well. It had its own naval force. It went out and opened markets.
So it was an early NATO.
In a way, I suppose so. But today, when I think about the 21st century version of the Hanseatic League, I think of actually a precursor from a couple of decades ago. Who remembers the BCCI, the Bank of Commerce and Credit International? Right. So BCCI was an entity. It was a Pakistani-run but Dubai-based international bank that had its own private intelligence services and used private mercenary armies and funded the anti-Soviet Mujahideen for the CIA while also doing bank money laundering for the world's drug lords. Today's city-states in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere with their sovereign wealth funds are actually hiring private military companies to protect agricultural assets that they've bought in Africa. This murky, nefarious world represents an alliance of self-interested cities that are going out and purchasing resources, creating what many are calling a new agricultural supply chain feudalism.
This is terrible.
It doesn't sound great.
This guy's a downer. We're on all this techno-utopian high all day. Now you're telling us the cities are all going to be thuggery, mafia-centered, and money launderers. What's going on?
The positive side of it.
In the Middle Ages, that was a terrible time to be alive. Is that what you want us to go back to?
But it was the golden age for so many people. But what's interesting is also, since you brought up technology and interconnections, today the ways in which city-states are sharing knowledge is fascinating. If you are a diplomat in Abu Dhabi, the flight you most regularly take is to Singapore to acquire knowledge on urban management best practices. The Singaporean government is more than just an elite city-state, a wealthy population, well-run. Many of their government agencies actually have commercial wings that go out internationally and sell the service of making your city more like Singapore for a profit.
Right.
So there's very interesting role models out there in terms of what global cities are doing to promote connections. And a city's diplomacy is really the sum of its connections.
Well, let's pick up on that. I want to come to the audience in a minute, so please get your questions together. But on the point about cities and diplomacy, I think, Saskia, you talked about new multipolar models of perhaps city diplomacy, not the old sort of hub and spoke or key axis model. Tell us what you mean by that, and as cities begin to punch above their weight, we know our own beloved mayor here in New York secretly goes off on weekends on trips, we're not quite sure where, but he's been filmed at gun shows, I think, or his proxies have been filmed in Arizona, overseas. So clearly, mayors are thinking they're presidents or presidential. What could this lead to?
Well, the image that comes to mind when you say that we're moving to a multipolar world is the fact that China is rising, or before that, the Soviet Union perhaps, but not really, that we call the Cold War. But I think that misses the point. I think that the genuine, the real stuff in terms of moving towards a multipolar world has far more to do with the fact that cities, and we're talking about like 70 plus cities that are really strategic global cities, including such cities as Istanbul. Istanbul is enormously significant, east-west. That cities are creating this infrastructure, as I like to say, built in stone. That's sort of a figurative statement. Okay, there's all these other things, but that are really the infrastructure for our multipolar world. This modernity that we are living in now is different from the modernity of the rising modern state, of the Cold War era, of the Keynesian time. And so, to me, this is incredibly interesting because, see, I also think of cities, a well-built city, a complex city, a city where you have a lot of diversity. I think is a space that, if you think of the national state, let me backtrack, the national state, it's in the DNA of the national state to sort of militarize conflict. It's not in the DNA of cities to militarize conflict.
Because we abolish standing armies at the city level, right? Yeah.
Well, but not just cities are the sites for enormous conflicts, but commerce and the civic. That's the DNA of cities. And so they try to, of course we have all kinds of terrible things happening in cities. But to me it's very interesting. And so if cities become these strategic spaces, they have less power than powerful national states, but they mix far more elements that are constitutive of this modernity. You see, so to me this is a very interesting thing. And I think that the most of the big cities have dozens of foreign offices now. New York has over 100, actually.
Sure.
So that's a whole other kind of diplomacy, you know? And it is a very different infrastructure from that of the national states. So